Hello, hello, friends. We are entering Gemini season at a time when Gemini's ruling planet Mercury is in the sign of Gemini. Its domicile, meaning its home where it enjoys being, which means that a lot of the Mercury transits we will be seeing for this Gemini new moon, where the sun and moon will also be in Gemini, throwing a crazy mercurial party around this time will also be happening. So whatever's going on with Mercury will be more notable right now. It'll be coming through a bit clear, really indicating clearer communication for many of us. A lot of notable information coming through, finally being able to connect the dots and properly articulate things, receive information in a different way, just clarity all around, socializing all around, clearer pathways, clearer roads when it comes to networking, asking questions, receiving information, getting your point across. And we see that Saturn is entering Aries 2 days before this new moon. This is the start of a Saturn return for anybody with Saturn in Aries. It's marking the end of a Saturn return. If you have your Saturn in Pisces, we're going to talk about all of it. I'm so excited. Let's get started. Hello, hello, friends. It's your girl, Alina, and welcome back to my little corner of the internet where we talk about the top transits, mainly new moons and full moons every single month. We focus on alignment, not just with the cosmos and the seasons, but aligning with our intuition. So welcome in, get comfy, grab your snack or drink, or maybe start a chore. Just listen to the audio. But I'm so happy that you're here with me and just want to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you like content like this. I have a sad update, not really sad, but kind of. Had to cancel the retreat that was going to happen this August. At the end of the journaling section, at the end of the video, I will elaborate on all of it. And, we're pivoting. I'm a driven Gemini stellium. I'm not stopping. We're still doing stuff, but I just wanted to give you that update. But with that said, let's dive in. All right, so on May 26th, we're going to be having a Gemini new moon in this mutable air sign of Gemini ruled by Mercury. And so this lunation will be most strongly felt if you have sun, moon, or rising in any of the mutable signs of Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, or Pisces. And of course, this will be impacting all of us in its own unique ways. As always, I always suggest looking at your own natal chart, seeing what planets are in Gemini, what house is in Gemini, to more notably, not more notably, but to understand how this lunation will likely more acutely impact you. And I will be giving an all signs forecast reading in this video, of course, for your sign. So you can understand that. I'll be basically explaining that to you. To set the foundation, as many of you already know, new moons mark the beginning of a new lunar cycle. It can be a really beautiful time for planting seeds of intention, starting anything fresh, and essentially aligning with the rhythm of this lunation, where as the light builds on the surface of the moon from its energetic low point right now, this liminal space of pure potential, all the way to its energetic and light peak at the full moon. So as the light builds, so too can the momentum around any sort of intentions that you set also build. Now, I want to really emphasize that new moons are most notably a time in astrology that's seen as an optimal time for rest and reflection. So not necessarily jumpstarting anything, but pausing to draw our energy back to ourselves, reflect, get clear on what worked and what didn't work over maybe the previous lunar cycle, but also isn't working in general, and anything that comes to the forefront of your mind right now, really leaning into your intuition and what organically is coming up. And that is why you see many people doing new moon rituals. And that's why in the Auraline Astrology Planner, it's an annual planner, it's my creation, I have dedicated new moon ritual pages for every single month. And you can check that out in the description box if that interests you. Adding another layer to this new moon, we see that it will be transiting Gemini. So with that said, let's look at some of the Gemini themes. So this can be a great time for new ideas, new messaging, social movements, really leaning into your curiosity, your openness to learning, your openness to writing, networking. What comes to mind that I think can be so constructive for many of us is anything that we might have been thinking about or circling back to, or maybe we've been trying it, over and over, maybe in a similar way, and we're kind of stumped. Around the time of this new moon, it can be incredibly helpful to simply ask for help, to simply be open-minded to different perspectives and start conversations that can be thought-provoking or open up our awareness to different ideas or different perspectives and approaches. Gemini in general, I am a Gemini stellium. And by the way, my birthday is May 22nd. So I'm really excited about it. And, I'm excited every year, but I have a Gemini stellium. My Mercury is in Gemini. It's in its domicile. It's a very notable placement in my charts. And I will just speak for myself as a representative of Gemini things that a lot of the Gemini energy is this openness to pivot. There's a lot of overarching themes of being malleable. Gemini is a mutable air sign. Think about air. It's everywhere. It's changing. It's moving. It's invisible, but it impacts things around it. I was just talking to my husband, asking maybe a dumb question, but I think that the symbolism here and the element of air is very notable for this lunation. And I was like, does air make noise, or is it producing noise through impacting things around it? For example, the sound of leaves moving or grass moving in the wind or trees moving in the wind. I know that that's a silly question, but it kind of brings up this overarching theme and symbolism with the element of air, in that it's incredibly malleable. It's almost like Geminis are really good at being chameleons, really good at pivoting. Like a lot of my online presence and even my stationary business did very well during COVID because I had to pivot. And it was very hard for me, but it was this openness to, shifting and pivoting and being malleable and, adapting to change. And so these are some of the themes and some of the qualities of Gemini that we can lean into right now, especially if we're noticing change in our life, exploring what does it look like for me to pivot? What does it look like for me to grow where I have been planted versus looking at the grass being greener on the other side versus tending to my own grass. And, you know what I mean? So those are a lot of the overarching themes going on, but I'm excited to dive deeper into it. But before we do, let's talk about the top transits happening leading up to this new moon and around the time of it that will inform how this lunation will more likely impact us on a more specific level. Okay. So first up, I have to extend a very happy birthday to my fellow Geminis, my Gemini sons. What a do. We are having our solar return. The sun is coming back to where it was around the time of our births. I am obviously very biased here. I love the springtime. I just love it. But in general, from an astrology perspective, Gemini season is such a great levity and reprieve coming out of Taurus season. And that Taurus season can bring a lot more groundedness, sometimes maybe on some sides of the coin for some of us, a bit of stagnation, whereas Gemini season can bring a bit more brightness, lightness, levity to things, in that there's a lot of this youthful curiosity, a lot of this youthful longing to socialize and connect and interact with people and tell people the things that we have learned or developed since the start of the astrological New Year's, going through Aries season, then Taurus, then here. And there's these overarching themes of curiosity, mental agility, adaptability, socializing, asking for help, giving advice, giving help, and the power of connection and community in that way. Gemini in general, it's the sign of shorter term travel, light, think of like pop culture insights, like, oh, I just learned this cool thing. Let me share this fun fact, versus the deeper work that's associated with its sister sign of Sagittarius, which is also all about learning, but that deeper, long-term, higher learning, deeper years of research learning. Gemini is more of the levity of like, oh, I learned this fun fact. And so all of that to say, Gemini season can be a beautiful time for connecting with people, reconnecting with people. If you're working through something or you're looking for guidance in some way, leaning into the power of asking for help, doing research. Those are the general themes, and I'm wishing you a beautiful, happy birthday to my Gemini friends. I would love if you comment down below your experience with Geminis, good or bad, we'll be open-minded, and whether or not, this is your birthday season. I want to say happy birthday to you. All right, so one of the most notable transits of this entire year will be happening 2 days before this new moon, when we see that Saturn will be entering the sign of Aries on May 24th, changing signs for the first time in over 2 years. Now, like I mentioned in the intro, this is very notable, not just for people who have Saturn in Aries or Saturn in Pisces, not just for people who, if your Saturn is in Aries, that means that your Saturn return is coming, or if your Saturn is in Pisces, that means that your Saturn return is ending. But because Saturn is this slower moving planet, it marks these 2.5-year cycles for all of us. Now, a little background: Saturn is considered a malefic planet. It's one of 2 malefic planets, that being Saturn and Mars. And Saturn is considered to be the strict teacher in astrology. And what I mean by that is, it's this planet that is all about tough lessons if we don't learn it the first time. Think about, a caretaker or a teacher who they give you detention, or they give you a bad grade, and it's not in a malicious way. It's because they want to make sure that you are learning your lesson, because they see your potential and they understand that the positive reinforcement they were giving you an A wasn't enough. Now there's a bit of negative reinforcement here. And this is a part of why a lot of people dread Saturn returns. There's a lot of stories of complete upheaval and change in our lives. And a part of that is, I really want to give you this context, is because Saturn is not a planet that messes around. It's the opposite of a benefic, of a lucky, expansive planet like Jupiter or Venus. And for all of us, now that Saturn is entering Aries, we want to look at our chart and see what house Aries is in, to then understand what area of our life, that house involves, to understand where these potential wake-up calls or potential challenges or potential pushback that ultimately is there to strengthen us and have us rise to the occasion and mature might most likely show up for us. So that is a bit of context to Saturn entering Aries, why you might hear a bit of doom and gloom or dread or anything like that. That is the context there. I would love if you commented down below if you'd like me to do a separate video on Saturn entering Aries and what that means for each sign. I would love to do that. The last piece of context that I want to give is that Saturn will be going back into Pisces in a few months, and then it'll be entering back into Aries. It'll be retrograding back, I believe, and then it'll be in Aries long term for about 2 years. And so that's really notable. Now, another piece of context is that when Saturn is in Aries, it's a time for maturing through action, leadership, independence, and identity work. And I say that because Aries in general is this sign. It's the very first sign of the zodiac. It's all about you. It's all about how do you initiate things. It's all about beginnings. It's about leadership. It's about taking the first step. For many of us, there will be a lot of lessons around whether or not we have been taking the necessary initiative to move the needle in the way that we want versus waiting for somebody to magically appear and hand it to us. That is going to be a big thing for many of us. But ultimately, it will be laying the groundwork for this long-term personal journey that all of us have when it comes to autonomy, when it comes to advocating for ourselves, because those are a lot of the themes that Aries brings. It's a cardinal sign. It's about being advocating for ourselves and others and starting things. So that is the context there. Now, in context with the new moon, when it comes to a few days leading up to it, a few days following it, again, because Saturn is a slower moving planet, this is marking the steady transition into a lot of these things. And so on May 24th, when Saturn enters Aries, that's not necessarily this guarantee that, boom, everything's going to change. But especially coupled with this new moon, it's definitely this huge signification of a new cycle that's starting for many of us. So that is that on that. Next up, we see that with this being a new moon in Gemini, Gemini is ruled by Mercury. And so we want to see what's going on with Mercury to kind of get a feel of the themes of this lunation as well. And so Mercury will be in Gemini in its domicile. So what that means is Mercury is in Gemini in a sign that it rules. That essentially means that Mercury is in an environment, in a house, its domicile, a place that it's familiar with. So it's much happier there, indicating that this lunation will be one of really easy flowing supportive energy for us right off the bat. And Mercury in Gemini will be sextiling with Neptune which will be in Aries. Now, this is a type of transit, I'm looking at my notes, that can boost imaginative thinking, spiritual downloads, and intuitive communication. And I say that because Neptune is the planet of dreams, imagination, creativity. Think astral projection, think escapism, think creative flow. And it's sextiling, which is a very complementary and mutually supportive aspect between planets. And it's doing that with Mercury, the planet of communication. And this is excellent because it's indicating that around the time of this lunation, a lot of us are going to be getting incredible downloads that we can properly write down and articulate and actually connect the dots and communicate in proper ways to, maybe if it's a download of something that we want to create or that we feel called to do, to move in alignment with, it's a lot easier to break things down and make things tangible. It can be great for writing, dreaming, envisioning future ideas, dream journaling, and even conversations and creative flow can feel a lot more inspired and otherworldly. And the last transit happening at the time of this lunation will be when Mercury in Gemini will be trining with Pluto, which is retrograde in Aquarius. Now, this is the type of transit that can bring about for some of us more deeper transformative insights, again, that can really bring about inspiring, notable dialogue. Like Mercury, the planet of communication, having these complementary sextiles and trines with Pluto and with Neptune really indicate that there's going to be deeper rooted insights, whether it's ideas, creative ideas, or even finally connecting deeper rooted, more intimate understandings of our subconscious or conscious, motivations. These are the type of things that can come about. So I highly encourage journaling a few days leading up to a few days following this new moon. I highly encourage, if you have people in your life where if I get into conversation with them, we always have inspiring conversations. Like, this is a great time to do that. In general, this can be a really great time for uncovering truth, healing, having more healing conversations, and really strategic planning that gets down to the root of things, because Pluto is a planet of intimacy, of deeper rooted motivations. It's also the planet of power struggles, deeper rooted motivations, and necessary breakdowns for breakthroughs. And with it retrograde, it's indicating that a lot of this is going to be very internal reflections. But with it coming together with Mercury, the planet of communication, it's really indicating us finally finding the words. So again, really lean into this notable time for finally finding the words, you know what I mean? And set yourself up for success in that way. That's my biggest, most generalized sort of advice for this lunation coming up. All right, y'all, let's go ahead and dive into these all sign forecasts. As always, I suggest that you go to your rising sign, because that will be a reading that encompasses more so all aspects of life. Based off of your rising sign, it tells me, when I'm looking at a whole sign chart, the specific house that this new moon will be transiting. So I know exactly where it will be impacting you. But if you want to look at your sun sign, that will be more of an indicator of how you will experience things in terms of how it impacts your sense of self, your identity, as well as your career, the image that you imbue onto others and that people receive from you. If you want to look at your moon sign, that'll have more of an indication of how you'll receive things emotionally in interpersonal relationships. But yeah, I will see you at your sign. Hello to my Aries friends. So this new moon in Gemini will be transiting and activating your third house of communication, mindset, local environment. So around the time of this new moon, a few days leading up to it, a few days following, you have a higher likelihood of having insightful conversations with people like your siblings, your neighbors, or your close friends. And like I mentioned before, with Gemini's ruler Mercury having pretty notable and complementary transits with Neptune and Pluto, there's a higher likelihood of, if you decide to engage in these conversations with others or even with yourself through writing or anything like that, you might notice some notable ideas, downloads, or insights that pop up around this time that are likely rooted in deeper self-understanding or deeper understanding of others. A quick example of this is that I was collaborating with someone via email primarily, just virtually, not just email. And I felt this strain between us for a while. And I realized that at least the part that I played and that was in my control, I hadn't fully or more directly communicated my boundaries, like what was in or out of my capacity for this collaboration. And so through communicating that and, essentially communicating that, it has helped the dynamic so much more. And it's a small thing, but it can make such a huge difference of reflecting on the part that we play. And so, around this time, leaning into the power of your words, the power of clear communication of what is and isn't working for you, the power of circling back and being like, oh, did you mean this? Those type of things can be very helpful and really align with creating clear pathways for you. Around this time, it can be really great for starting new writing projects, or even, like I said, setting boundaries through our communication, or asking more clarifying questions in our collaborative spaces. Those are the things that are going to have a more notable impact around this time. And really, because this is in your third house, there's a higher likelihood that it's going to be a lot easier, not only for you to articulate things and get things into words in a way that is just more clearly thought out, but there's a lot more mental clarity right now with mentally processing things and also receiving information in a clear way. So really lean into that around this time. Intention setting with your communication and collaboration is really great around this time. And if you're the type of person who has been looking for friends or looking to network and connect with people and gain ideas, don't be afraid of leaning into going to a meetup or, reaching out to someone being like, hey, do you know what's going on this weekend? Anything like that, because the roads are very clear for many of us right now. Obviously, there's nuance here. For your third house, you want to look and see what is in your third house in your natal chart, because some of those things might be activated around this time, especially if there's any placements in your third house. At what degree? At 6 degrees in Gemini. So that's just something to remember. But yeah, sorry, I'm looking at my notes and my phone is like falling. But with that said, I will see you at the end of the video for the journal prompts, for a little update about the retreat and general updates. So yeah. Hello, and welcome to my Taurus friends. So this Gemini new moon will be activating your second house of earnings, self-worth, money, your deeper rooted values, and material stability. And with the context of this lunation being in this malleable, communicative air sign of Gemini, it's really indicating that a few days leading up to and following this lunation, you might notice some themes around talking about not just finances necessarily, but what signifies stability and security for you? What leaves you feeling grounded? There can be conversations around the material world that might be material possessions that also, again, might manifest as your earnings, your finances. And around this time, I think for some of you, some of my fellow, my Taurus friends, some of y'all might be circling back to some tax stuff. Maybe you fell behind some of the deadlines. If you're in the US, that was mid-April. And now you're like, okay, let me get that together. If you have been having, thoughts around organizing finances or getting clear on certain things, properly communicating to yourself in writing a clear budget, having a clear point of reference, maybe you open up a Google Sheet or even in your notes, like, this is what my goals are, even just broadly speaking. And you just have that point of reference, or you're communicating that to other people, collaborating with a tax person or with maybe someone you live with in terms of rent, all of these things. Those type of conversations will be a lot easier flowing around this time. It wouldn't hurt for you to lean into all of these clear roads when it comes to more clarifying conversations that can happen around this time. So don't hesitate on that. And you can consider asking yourself, what potential internal beliefs have influenced your relationship with the idea of abundance, your relationship with that. So think about your own self-image. Think about when I say you can have an abundant life, where you look at so many aspects of your life and you're like, wow, that's abundant. Wow, that's abundant. In my relationships, it's abundant. In my finances, it's abundant. In my home, my security, my neighborhood, it's abundant. What does that look like for you? And if you say those things, like, really literally practice saying it out loud. If there's any hesitation there, in spite of your desire for that, if you have a desire for that, pausing to ask yourself and question those things and get clear on any potential limiting beliefs or self-doubts, and getting deeper into, okay, maybe I do have a self-doubt. Maybe I do question my ability to do X, Y, and Z. Journaling and asking yourself, where does that come from? Oh, because of X, Y, and Z. Like, okay, where does that come from? And finding the source, demystifying a lot of these sometimes unaddressed worldviews and self-image things, that can be very notable around this time, because it can feel a lot more clear to get to the root of it, especially considering that Mercury, the ruling planet of Gemini, will be sextiling. Oh no, I believe it's a trine with Pluto, Pluto being the planet of the underbelly, the deeper rooted subconscious motivations of things, the intimate, the hidden, the taboo. There can be a lot of insights that come around this time. So an overarching sort of reading for you is that, again, talk of finances, security, potentially home, material things that leave you feeling grounded. Those things can come up around this time. And if you decide to dive into those things in any capacity, there can be a lot of clarity if you decide to, another example is asking for help, asking, like, I actually don't even know where to start when it comes to financial literacy, asking for help, seeking advice. All of those things, there's a lot more clear roads for you right now. But with that said, I'm sending you my love, my Taurus friends, and I'll see you at the end for the journal prompts and to kind of do a little catch up. Oops, sorry if that made a noise. To do a little catch up on the retreat stuff and just catch up in general. Peace. Hello to my fellow Gemini friends, the stars of the show. We have the sun and moon together conjunct for this new moon, all in your first house of the self, the body, personal direction, fresh starts, initiations, self-image. And with that context, this is, and considering that the ruling planet of Gemini is having very complementary transits with these very illuminating planets of Neptune, the planet of dreams, imagination, creativity, and Pluto, the planet of deeper rooted shadows, the subconscious, uncovering things like the taboo, shadow self, all of these things. This is our lunar reset, y'all. This is a beautiful time. And I don't want to say that to be like, oh, you need to do all this stuff and you need to take advantage. I don't want you to be stressed. The thing is that we could be living our lives and a lot of these themes organically show up in our lives. And it's, if we want to lean into them a little bit or, not at all, whatever, that, it can be really great to align with it. It's so funny. I'm talking about an air sign right now, and it's so airy and windy this time of year in the Northern Hemisphere in the spring. And my house just like rocked a little bit. But all of that to say, this is a few days leading up to, a few days following this lunation. This is such a beautiful time for pausing to reflect on how far you've come, as well as if it feels right to you, if it feels organic, considering, if you want to reinvent how you express yourself, how you show up in the world, how you tend to your body, how you care for your body. The first house is a house of the body. If you want to initiate something different, if you feel like you've learned a lot of notable lessons over the last year leading up to our solar return, the sun coming back to transiting the sign of Gemini, now is such a beautiful time for reflecting on those things, pausing to celebrate how far you've come. Maybe it's during your birthday, but also if you feel ready to change something up, most notably how you communicate who you are. Like, I will say on a personal level, something I have finally been putting to practice is really leaning into showing up exactly how I am. And what I mean by this is getting a little personal, I guess, but whatever, I don't know. But there have been a handful of times where somebody asks me, what do you do for a living? And you and I both know what I do for a living. I'm an astrologer. I give forecasts. I connect with my online community, like all things air, all things mercurial, basically. And I freaking love it. And I make astrology planners and calendars, and I love calling myself an astrologer. I'm taking astrology classes right now. That's what I do. But I oftentimes find myself describing myself as, I run a stationery company. That's kind of it. And that only covers a fraction of what I do. But I found myself kind of hiding and not fully communicating exactly who I am out of fear of judgment, out of fear of people with, in my opinion, partially misguided religious beliefs around, astrology and things like that. And I've it takes me a while to kind of process things and fully take aligned actions with them. And something I've been learning over the last year has been like, when you're hiding yourself or you're not fully communicating what you can and can't do, what is and isn't in your capacity, what your boundaries are, whether it's indirectly through little, responses to certain behaviors, or whether it's just, communicating who you are at the jump of meeting people, it can really slow down you finding your people. And it can really slow down the process of people and yourself deciding if it's a good fit when it comes to friendships, collaborators, and so much more. And it's when we show up authentically that we have this immediate, like, oh, cool, I don't vibe with that. And then I'm like, oh, cool, I don't vibe with people who don't vibe with what I'm doing. You know what I mean? And being also okay with rejection, And so that's just my unique story, but I'm giving it as an example of the power of reworking how we communicate who we are, and communicating our boundaries sometimes, and pivoting little bits here and there, maybe not necessarily being like, on the new moon, on this day, I will do that. As Geminis, I'm sure you can relate. It's not always realistic to have these structured, I'm going to do this on this date, but more so phase into it in the same way that, a cloudy day phase is in from a sunny day, thanks to the steady push of the wind in the air. You know what I mean? So I don't know, that's something that hopefully it resonates with some of you, my personal story in that regard. But ultimately, around the time of this new moon, going back to this reading, it can be very there's a lot of clear roads, a lot of clear paths when it comes to fresh starts, when it comes to personal goals, your style, your voice, your physical energy, how you care for yourself in alignment with what it is you want to do in life in a lot of ways. Like what comes to mind is how we're nourishing ourselves so that we have the energy to do what it is that we want to do. And consider asking yourself, who are you now? And how can your outer world better reflect your truth, in a more clear, direct way? But ultimately, these are the type of themes that can come up right now. This reflection on your self-identity, how you present yourself to the world, these potential themes around how you care for yourself, potential themes around, your personal life direction, reflecting on how far you've come. These are the type of things that can come up around the time of this new moon as we enter a new lunar cycle, a new fresh start for ourselves. And but with that said, I am sending you my love. I'll see you at the end of this video for the journal prompts to catch up about retreat updates and just general updates. And peace. Hello, my Cancer friends. Get ready to pull out that dream journal, okay? This might not be for you having more vivid dreams is definitely something that seems aligned with this lunation, because it will be transiting your 12th house. It's all about the subconscious, about retreating, calling your energy back to yourself. Think of a sabbatical, think of endings of something that can be coming up right now. Think of deeper rooted healing that often comes from, kind of not giving your energy out to so many. It's very much aligned with a new moon, which is all about rest and reflection before we take the next steps into a new cycle or a new chapter in our lives. And I say that not only because this new moon, where we see the sun and moon together, and Mercury all in Gemini, all in your 12th house, that has a lot of these themes. But on top of that, we see that Gemini's ruling planet, Mercury, will be having very complementary and mutually beneficial sort of transits or aspects with Neptune, the planet of dreams, the subconscious imagination, and with Pluto, the planet of, again, also subconscious, but deeper rooted motivations. Think of the shadow self, think of things within that capacity, right? And so with that said, this lunation, a few days following, a few days leading up to it, can be such a notable time of connecting the dots with deeper rooted subconscious beliefs, maybe potentially limiting beliefs, maybe beliefs that you realize, wow, I really have this going for me. Like I've always been the type of person that I believe that I can troubleshoot anything, or, whatever it is. It's not necessarily you're realizing bad thoughts, but you're also realizing thoughts that work for you. And, all of that to say, this can be a very potent time where there's a lot more clear roadways and paths when it comes to gaining clarity with your deeper rooted motivation. So a great example of this is if you're journaling right now and you're asking yourself like, oh, I have this anxiety around this thing. Where does this anxiety come from? Writing it down clearly and simply. Oh, it comes from a fear of being seen, or it comes from this. Where does that come from? Oh, I had these experiences during this time, or somebody said something to me. Okay, are those based in reality? Or, like having those deeper conversations, getting to the root of things. Maybe it's therapy for you. There could be potential breakthroughs around this time, but ultimately this is indicating a fresh start and a new cycle where there's less friction when it comes to gaining this clarity. So this can be a powerful time to start new spiritual practices, beginning journaling or tending to your inner world in more of a dedicated way than maybe you have before. Maybe you've been working so much, you've been busy pouring into everyone else. Around this time can be a very potent moment for, it doesn't have to be a whole full-on ritual or you're taking the day. If you want to, you can, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. But if you offer a landing pad for insights, better self-understanding to come through, whether that be through going to therapy, whether that be through journaling, whether that be through setting the intention before bed to have a dream that brings insight, and really prioritizing as soon as you wake up, writing it down and reflecting. These are things that are like these landing pads so that if these insights are there, you can really sit with and process them. And really clarity can come through, again, dreams, solitude, gentle reflection, and really consider asking yourself, what potential mental clutter, if any, or hidden fears are you maybe ready to release so that something softer can begin, so that there's room cleared for this landing pad for something new to arise. But yeah, that's my reading for you, my Cancer friends. I'm sending you my love, and I'll see you at the end of the video for journaling and for a little update about the retreat. And yeah, peace. Hello to my Leo friends. So this Gemini new moon will be happening and activating your 11th house of community, goals, collaborations, social impact, and your impact on the world, or the ways in which the things that you have learned are shared with others in some capacity. That can look like work, but that can also look like your community, whether that's your neighborhood or a group that you go to or your friend group or your family. But ultimately, the 11th house is all about collaboration. So this is really indicating a few days leading up to this lunation or following it, themes around new beginnings when it comes to potential friendships, your audience, or your collaborators, whether that's at work, or your long-term visions, like thinking, what are your long-term ideas and goals? And because we see that this is a new moon, new fresh starts, this is this liminal space where intentions that we set right now have a higher likelihood of gaining momentum if we take aligned steps with them. And considering that Gemini's ruling planet, Mercury, is having very complementary transits with Neptune, the planet of imagination, Pluto, the planet of the subconscious, getting to the root of things. And there's just a lot more, it all signifies this time where there's a lot more clear roads when it comes to properly and effectively communicating things with our collaborators, properly communicating even with ourselves what our long-term goals are, and finding alignment with our deeper rooted motivations, especially with Pluto having a role right now, taking a pretty notable role right now. And so setting intentions around how you maybe contribute to the world or who you're building it with, really finding clarity. There can be a lot of clarity that can come from reflecting on these things right now. So this again can be a great time to join or rejoin, or reflect on or pour energy into groups or collaborating on shared projects or refining your larger sort of vision, your larger why, the why behind your actions and what that looks like for you. These type of reflections can really produce a higher likelihood of a lot of clarity and a lot of insightful ideas and downloads that you might learn from others right now through your collaborations. What comes to mind is asking for advice, being open to giving advice. And ultimately, whether you are giving or receiving information, you're ultimately fortifying and nourishing who you are through community. You know, we are community-based organisms ultimately. And I know that, you know, you might be listening to this thinking, I am an introvert girl. I don't go to meetups, blah, blah, blah. Like, I totally get that. And I just want to say that this can manifest in so many different ways. Like, it can manifest through interactions with family, collaborations through work, or again, it can manifest as you with yourself reflecting on what are your boundaries with community? What is your capacity when it comes to the amount of energy you can give to others? And how, especially with this being a Gemini lunation, how can you lean into the power of communication in communicating what your boundaries are, or getting clear with yourself what works and what doesn't work for you, so that your giving is sustainable long term and is mutually beneficial. You know, so getting clear on those things, that can be very helpful. I recently had a very helpful conversation with somebody that I was kind of having a hard time collaborating with, where I finally was able to properly articulate over email, hey, this is what my schedule is. This is what I have the capacity to offer in this collaboration. These are my motivations. This is why I can and cannot do these things. I just want to be really upfront with you where I'm at. Please let me know if that works for you, and if it doesn't, or how we can collaborate on this. And as soon as I sent that, it gave me so much peace of mind knowing that no matter what happened, I did what was my personal responsibility, which was letting everyone know where I was at. And so that's just a good example. But you can also consider asking yourself, what kind of community truly supports the future that you're working towards? And how are you supporting community while working towards your goals, right? No man is an island, right? So anyway, that is my reading for you, my Leo friends. I'm sending you my love, and I'll see you at the end for the journal prompts and for a little update about retreat stuff. And yeah. Hello to my Virgo friends. So this Gemini new moon will be activating your 10th house of your outer circle, your reputation. Think your career, visibility, how people view you. You know, the concept of being perceived. Again, you know, with reputation, and your life direction. With this being a new lunar cycle, a fresh start in a lot of ways. With this being in Gemini, this is indicating a very notable and sort of clear pathway sort of time when it comes to initiating any potentially new professional goals, maybe reworking existing ones, pivoting based off of resting and reflecting around the time of this lunation and looking at what has and hasn't been working for you. This can be a beautiful time to pause and finally find the words to properly articulate. Maybe it's to others or just to yourself through journaling or reflection in some way, whether or not your current pathway, again, when it comes to career, your broader reputation, your broader goals, whether or not they're fully aligned with who you are as a person, with your skill sets, alignment with your deeper rooted values, your morals, things like that. This can be a great time to finally find the words to get clear on those things. But ultimately your voice, you know, communication or writing may become more central with your public work around this time. You know, there might be some themes leading up to this lunation or following it where you're maybe announcing something, or there's going to be notable conversations around this time that pertain to your broader reputation, your broader image, your broader network, and again, that a lot of times modern astrology, we do apply that to career. It could be career, but it could be, you know, your broader networks in some capacity. This could be as simple as, oh yeah, I'm going to be sending out an announcement letter that I'm moving, or that I'm having a child, or that I'm X, Y, and Z. This might be what it is, or I'm helping somebody with some type of thing like that. But ultimately with Gemini, this being a Gemini lunation, Gemini's ruling planet Mercury being in great transits and aspects with Neptune and Pluto when it comes to articulating our dreams, receiving downloads, finally putting words to ideas or images or creative concepts that you might have had. This is the time where you might notice that you're finally connecting those dots. You're finally finding the words, or people around you are, and there's more notable conversation ultimately when it comes to your career. So again, some pretty fruitful actions to take around this time that could be of help. Will definitely be leaning into getting clear for yourself or maybe for others, properly communicating where you're at, career-wise, where you're at in terms of your public image, what you can and cannot do, when it comes to your broader networks in some ways. And consider asking yourself, what message are you ready to bring to the world? Sorry, I'm reading my notes. That was kind of an awkward reading. And how will you structure it? What will that look like for you? So that's my reading for you, my Virgo friends. Again, we have the Sun, Moon, and Mercury all in your 10th house right now. So heavy 10th house themes of career, visibility, reputation, and life direction. But a lot of clear roads in those spaces and a lot of interesting downloads, insights, and information will likely be shared around the time of this lunation leading up to and following it. So if you want to lean into that in communicating things, maybe there's something that you've been trying to get out with your collaborators in some respect or anything like that, now can be a notable time to consider looking into that. But that's what's going on for you, my Virgo friends. That concludes my reading. I am sending you my love, and I'll see you at the end of this video for journal prompts and for a little update about the retreat. Peace. Hello to my Libra friends. Welcome in. So this lunation, this Gemini new moon, will be activating your 9th house of expansion. Think all things expansion of wisdom, expansion in learning, in belief systems, in it could look like publishing, it could also look like travel, long distance travel, long-term travel. All of these aspects of expansion. Travel is an aspect of expansion. We're expanding our world through experiencing the world through different cultures and taking in different perspectives, new perspectives. And so for my Libra friends, this is indicating a few days leading up to, a few days following this new moon. It could be very literal in that you might be planning a trip of some kind, or you're planning something. Maybe you've already gotten the tickets or you're about to, or you've gotten most things settled, but now you're getting clear on what the schedule will be. It's at the forefront of your mind. There can also be a more spiritual bend to this, where around this time you might feel more inspired to look into different spiritual or even philosophical perspectives of life. Again, there's really this indication of a fresh start in that perspective, whether you're maybe readjusting your approach to these things or you are starting, a new learning path. You might even be signing up for courses or classes around this time, or you've even simply found a great playlist on YouTube or a great podcast that dives deeper into something. Think of the deeper learning, that deeper understanding of something. Those are some of the themes that can come up around this time. But ultimately, this can be a great time to ask yourself, what, if any, outdated beliefs are you maybe ready to challenge or even replace with lived wisdom? And again, with the context of this being a Gemini new moon, a moon in Gemini is really bringing in themes of learning. Gemini is a sister sign to Sagittarius, which is the sign of the 9th house. Both signs are all about information, whereas Gemini is, more about socializing, quick info. The 9th house in Sagittarius is all about the deeper wisdom, the deeper rooted knowledge, the long-term studies, higher learning. Think college, again, education. And there could be themes there. You might even be a teacher, and there's themes around your practice of teaching and bestowing knowledge onto others. But around this time, you may feel inspired to, again, begin studying something new or planning a trip or even publishing your thoughts, maybe even writing something down, whether that's literally in a book. These are some things that can come around this time. But ultimately, this lunation can be a beautiful time to start something new in terms of how you learn, how you teach, and how you connect broader truths, maybe even reconcile coexisting truths and what that looks like for you. On a practical level, this lunation can be a beautiful time for pausing to finally find the words and articulate ideas that you've maybe had already and you didn't have the words for. There can be a lot of insights around this time where you see a new perspective of things. Maybe you see a new perspective of different lifestyles, a new perspective of other spiritual or philosophical perspectives. But ultimately, there's this overarching theme of you broadening your awareness in some capacity, my Libra friends. And especially for, I know many Libras who can be very indecisive. This can be something that leads you to feel more decisive because you're doing the research in some way. But ultimately, yeah, those are all of the things that I wanted to say to you, my Libra friends. That concludes my reading for you, more aptly put. But with that said, I'll see you at the end for the journal prompts and to catch up a bit talking about retreat updates and stuff like that. Peace. Hello to my Scorpio friends. And though a Gemini new moon can usually signify a bit of levity for everybody involved, because Gemini is a pretty light baby sign. It's the third sign in the zodiac. And it's all about fun facts and socializing, networking, being a social butterfly. This new moon for you guys will be transiting the 8th house of intimacy, shared resources, transformation, and deeper rooted healing. Gemini's ruling planet of Mercury will be having a very mutually beneficial trine aspect with Pluto, the planet of intimacy, shadows, power plays in some capacities, and Pluto is retrograde, indicating a lot of deeper rooted reflection. And, And then the last thing is that Mercury is also going to be sextiling with Neptune, which is the planet of imagination, dreams, creativity. So all of that to say, it's really indicating a few days leading up to, a few days following this lunation, there can be a higher likelihood of mental breakthroughs and clarity when it comes to either outwardly, when it comes to there's just being a higher likelihood of really illuminating conversations that can reveal potentially more emotional, but really potentially intimate conversations that can reveal deeper rooted things of like, you know what, I'm sorry about what happened. I was afraid of this. And think about more vulnerable conversations that get to the deeper rooted, like, oh, this is why I was upset, or this is why I felt hurt, or this is why you didn't hear from me, or hey, this is what I just noticed this. You want to talk about it, and these, and this can manifest as intimate conversations with people, like, conflict resolution, but it can also look like having a really good therapy session of like, oh, that's why that happened, or like, oh, I'm finally on the road to healing something. But ultimately there's these underlying themes of this intimacy, of potentially looking at deeper rooted motivations on a subconscious level, whether that's from trauma or from childhood, things, or ultimately there's some of those things can pop up right now. Ultimately the moon is the astral body that can directly impact our emotions, but our relationships. So that's something to consider. But on the other side of the coin, it can be a lot of this is pointing to a more inward revelations around deeper rooted things, deeper rooted healing, deeper rooted illumination and understanding of shadow aspects of ourselves, or taboo things, or things that you're realizing, oh, I pushed that down. And where does that come from? Me not wanting to discuss these things, and this facing of certain things. And whether that's through conversation that makes you then reflect, or you deciding to sit down and really align with a lot of the themes of this lunation, this being Gemini, finally finding the words to articulate, express things, put it down in words, and have that conversation with yourself through journaling. Maybe it's voice recording, maybe it's creative expression, maybe it's through dream journaling, and asking yourself, what's the deeper meaning of my dream? What do these things that I saw in my dream what do I uniquely associate them with, to better understand maybe why my subconscious is bringing it to the forefront of my mind? A lot of these things could potentially come up for you, my Scorpio friends, but ultimately this can be, again, a great time for also the 8th house. Oh yeah, I forgot about this. The 8th house is also a house of resources, namely shared resources. Think of contracts. So these are themes that can come up right now as well. Also, when it comes to shared resources, not just with money, but also think of deeper, intimate relationships where you're kind of codependent on each other, maybe in a toxic way, maybe in a healthy way of like, hey, I share my time with you. I share my trust in you in a lot of ways. And where can we find balance there? Or, conversations about that coming up, this sharing of love, as well as maybe finances or things like that. All of those things can come up for you right now. So this can be a great time to consider what it looks like to maybe restructure any debt that you have, reflect on any shared agreements. If you want a fresh start in that, if you want to rework it, or maybe everything's fine, but it's like you're finding the words to have a different conversation there in some way that can be helpful. And addressing any potential hidden fears around dependency. Again, this new moon is really signifying a beautiful time for a fresh start or a pivot or a reimagining when it comes to how we communicate, when it comes to clear communication, whether that's clear communication with boundaries, what we do and what we don't like, clear communication of ideas, socializing, networking, finding the type of people that are aligned with our, ideas of dependencies, our ideas of finances, of shared resources. So those are the overarching themes for you, my Scorpio friends. And consider asking yourself, what parts of yourself, if any, are you ready to maybe reveal or share, or you're ready to heal in order to deepen a connection? Because sometimes we hit certain roadblocks. A good example I'll briefly share is I had a hiccup, so to speak, with a family member. And ultimately, the issue that was re-arising, coming up with us was that we didn't have very good conflict resolution skills. And both of us were kind of regressing sort of back to our go-to, trauma response to a disagreement, which was not conducive to resolving a conflict that we had. And so it was through us taking these baby steps of essentially being like, hey, I'm safe. Hey, I'm safe. Through, okay, we're communicating. We're not hurting each other's feelings. We're communicating a little bit, not hurting each other's feelings, that we slowly worked towards regaining trust. And it was through having to be in these sort of intimate situations of being vulnerable with one another and communicating our perspectives and what hurt us, what didn't hurt us, that we were then able to build trust and rebuild a new foundation. And so I feel like that's a really great example of how things might play out for some of us. And yeah, I hope that this illuminates things for you, my Scorpio friends. I'm wishing you the best. I'm sending you my love. That concludes my reading for you. I will see you at the end for journal prompts and for a little update on the retreat. And yeah, peace. Hello to my Sagittarius friends. So this lunation will be really spotlighting all things relationships. Think about contracts, think about negotiations, think about equitability, balance, and justice as well. And I say that because this Gemini new moon will be activating your 7th house of partnerships, one-on-one dynamics, contracts, balance within relationships, again, equitability in a lot of ways. And so with that said, a few days leading up to this lunation, a few days following, don't be surprised if more important conversations arise that are rooted in striking a balance in your relationships, articulating your personal boundaries or hearing boundaries from others, just making sure that you're on the same page. It could be a simple conversation of like, hey, just want to make sure that we're clear on everything going forward. But ultimately, with this being a Gemini lunation, this is a very optimal time. There's a lot of open paths, open roads when it comes to illuminating conversations and being able to articulate ideas, new ideas that come about, even articulating like, hey, this is where I was coming from with this, just for better context, getting clear on those things. And this can be a great time for initiating honest conversations, even potentially renegotiating, agreements. This can be a great time for that. Having more open space for new partnerships as well. Maybe it's like, okay, I'm ready to put myself out there. Maybe it's on a romantic level, but maybe it's reaching out to people to collaborate with for your business on a professional capacity, on a creative capacity. capacity. There's a lot of open roads when it comes to socializing, networking, with us entering Gemini season, having a Gemini new moon with the sun, moon, and Mercury in its ruling sign of Gemini right now. There's a lot of easier flowing conversations happening right now where we can be on the same page. So especially when it pertains to partnerships, if you want to have conversations, it can be very helpful. And if you're single, this could also be a pretty notable time for setting intentions for the kind of partnerships you want, really getting clear on what does it look like to have balanced relationships in a romantic capacity, in a professional capacity, collaborative capacity. What does that look like to have a balanced relationship with our family, our friends, any capacity? And consider asking yourself, what maybe needs to be said or even restructured potentially so that your relationships reflect who you're becoming and what works for you? Because ultimately balance is when things work for you and the other person. What also comes to mind is compromise, right? No one person is the same. In order to coexist, sometimes compromise needs to happen. Sometimes acceptance of what is and what isn't needs to happen. Sometimes acceptance of what is in our power and what is not can help us as well. So those are ultimately the overarching themes for you, my Sagittarius friends, just an overarching theme of relationships, a few days following, a few days leading up to, and a few days following this lunation. It can be, you will likely have notable conversations that can be very illuminating when it comes to partnerships. And if you have any intentions to find more balance in your relationships or meet new people to develop more balanced relationships, now is a great time to lean into those things. And if you are maybe someone who's like, yeah, no, I don't see those things coming up for me, this can also be a great time to, on your own, have a time to journal and reflect within yourself and find the words for yourself, what works for you, and get clear on that for yourself on a personal level. There's a lot of clear, open roads and open paths for you. But with that, I'm sending you my love, and I will see you at the end of this video for the journal prompts and for a quick update about the retreat. Peace. Hello to my Capricorn friends. This Gemini new moon, this lunation, will be activating your 6th house of daily rhythm, work, your health, and service. So it's really signifying a potential new chapter for many of you when it comes to either starting something new or maybe reworking existing routines, wellness practices, or even work habits. The 6th house is a house of service, structure, routine, your rituals, the things that you come back to, fall back into, whatever leaves you feeling grounded and helps you with any form of consistency in your life. Now, for me as a Gemini stellium, with a lot of air and mutable, signs and planets in those signs, I am a big advocate of just reminding everybody that structure doesn't necessarily need to look like the more modern view of structure and consistency, where it's like at 5 a.m. I do this, at 10 a.m. I do that. It can look like really leaning into what works for you. So for example, for me, and I'm saying this because this lunation is really signifying potential new chapters or reworking or pivoting or adjustments within this part of your life potentially, or just these topics coming to the forefront of your mind, that what really has worked for me has been leaning into accepting that I'm just going to show up imperfectly sometimes, but I'm still going to show up. So if it's that I'm committing to walking every day, maybe I miss the window of time that I usually walk in the morning, and I do half of that in the afternoon, but I still did some, ultimately with this intention of getting my vitamin D in some capacity, moving my body in some capacity, supporting my lymphatic system, supporting my energy levels, all of these things, my mood. And if that core intention is met, whether or not I've shown up exactly right on the dot, it gives me a lot more grace and makes me feel a lot more excited to go do it, because I don't have this shame around not doing it perfectly or doing it right. And I'm just giving you that as an example. But ultimately, this can be a great time. I'm looking at my notes to refine things like your calendar, maybe upgrade any sort of health rituals that you have or practices, or commit to sustainable rhythm in some capacity. And consider, with this being in the sign of Gemini, the sign of communication, talking, networking, friendships, socializing, really consider communication and writing and how that might also become more integrated into your day-to-day tasks in some way. That also could be communicating what you're up to for accountability, or working with someone, socializing with someone in some capacity to help you with that. These are the themes that will likely be popping up a few days leading up to, a few days following this lunation. And these are the type of topics that, if you decide to lean into them, reflect on them, get clear on what works and what doesn't work for you, what are your boundaries in terms of the capacity that you have to serve others, and to show up in a way that is actually sustainable long-term in alignment with your ultimate goals. Reflecting on those things, asking yourself what has worked in the past, what hasn't. These are things that can be very fruitful right now. There's a lot of very clear channels for receiving ideas, receiving insights, articulating these ideas in effective ways for others right now. There's a lot of clear pathways for that for you right now, my Capricorn friends. So with that said, that concludes my reading for you. I am sending you my love. I'll see you at the end for the journal prompts and for a little, update about the retreat. And yeah, peace. Hello to my Aquarius friends. I'm so excited for you. This lunation, its placement, what's going on with Gemini's ruling planet Mercury, it's really indicating a lot of beautiful and insightful creative downloads, ideas, finally articulating things, and maybe even kickstarting something or pivoting pre-existing endeavors that go back to your creativity, that go back to your inner child expression, that go back to what brings you joy, the levity and the indulgence of romance, personal expression, and just showing up and shining as you are. And I say that, my Aquarius friends, because this Gemini new moon will be activating your 5th house of creativity, romance, joy, creative expression, inner child, shining authentically as you are. And I also say that because Gemini's ruling planet of Mercury is having very complementary transit with Neptune, the planet of imagination, creativity, dreams, escapism, and art, art. And so for many of you, there can be some overarching themes a few days leading up to, a few days following, and this can signify a cycle in which the themes of your creative expression, finally finding the words to, whether it's for yourself of like, I finally understand the intention behind this creative endeavor that's been playing around in my mind. Like, I finally understand X, Y, and Z about it. I finally feel comfortable reaching out and communicating that mercurial Gemini theme, and reaching out to people and networking and getting input from other people, or asking for help, or finally leaning into collaborating on these core things that have to do with your creativity, your joy. Or for many of us, it could look like just finally enjoying it, in the real life. Like, what comes to mind is a lot of music for many of you. And I say that because the sun, moon, and Mercury will all be in Gemini in your 5th house of creativity. Gemini is the epitome. It's the sign of music. All things out of air, all things out of socializing, communicating, conveying things through sound waves. So for many of you, it could be music, but it can be any form of creative expression. So I'm really excited for you, my Aquarius friends. But ultimately, if you decide to lean into these more clear roads, these more clear paths that are coming through, thanks to this fresh start with this new lunar cycle in your 5th house, thanks to these transits that Mercury is having with Neptune and Pluto, bringing a lot of illumination into your own subconscious, with a lot of illumination and clear channeled understanding and downloads and articulation and clarity when it comes to your ideas and your deeper rooted motivations, and maybe even your deeper rooted fears, to process those things and better understand. All of those themes are coming up around this time. And if you choose to lean into them, there can be a lot of clarity. There's a lot of clear pathways for that. So really remember, your voice matters. So consider asking yourself, how are you sharing your voice through your joy, through your creativity, through your authentic self, under any sort of mask, corporate mask, adulthood mask, I need to assimilate to look normal mask. And consider asking yourself, what would it look like to pursue what lights you up without overthinking it, without overthinking it. Those are the themes that are coming up for you, my Aquarius friends. I'm so excited for you. I'm sending you my love. And if any sort of creative download comes through, I would love to hear it in the comments. That'd be really interesting to hear. And with that said, I'll see you at the end for the journal prompts and for a little update about the retreat. And yeah, Peace. Hello, hello to my Pisces friends. So for you, my Pisces friends, this lunation will be transiting and activating your fourth house of your home life. Think of your inner world, your emotional foundations. This can look like family background, communicating with family around this time. This can look like nesting. This can look like potentially moving for some of you, but ultimately it's signifying a fresh start within that realm of your life. And with this being in the sign of Gemini, this is really indicating a beautiful time for planting seeds when it comes to socializing, networking, maybe sharing with others, articulating, or even articulating with yourself through a list where you're at in terms of your inner circle of I think that especially a few days leading up to a few days following, there will likely be some themes around communications with your closer network of friends, your closer family members. There's more communication going on right now, especially if you maybe have been troubleshooting something or maybe even conflict resolution around the time of this lunation. It's really signifying a fresh start that is capable of happening when it comes to having more open conversations in a lot of ways. And this moon can really be planting seeds around home life, emotional security. That's a big thing, emotional security and family dynamics. You may also feel called to start a potential project having to do with your home. This might involve moving. Maybe you've already moved and you're nesting right now, or shifting who you share your space with, shifting your boundaries of what your safe space is, getting clear on those things, reflecting on generational patterns as well, because the fourth house has to do with family life. But ultimately, considering that Gemini's ruling planet of Mercury is having very mutually beneficial and sort of clear flowing aspects with Neptune, the planet of the imagination, the subconscious, creativity, dreams, and also with Pluto, the planet again of the subconscious, but more so the shadow side. Think of the taboo, hidden things, maybe things that are unconscious motivations that are coming to the surface. And considering that Pluto is retrograde right now, it's indicating a lot of internal reflection and finally finding the words to articulate, maybe it's to yourself, deeper rooted motivations. This might be specific, but for some of you, this might look like finally having the words to properly express boundaries with certain people, to really make sure that your immediate circle, your home, feels safe, feels grounding for you, because ultimately, it's like your inner circle and your home. These are the places that we want to feel most grounded and safe, right? These are our sanctuaries, so to speak, on a social level and on an immediate home level. And for some of us, it could be, you might have a party coming up. You might have a gathering coming up where you're, reconnecting with people, socializing in some capacity. But ultimately, there's a lot of clear pathways, clear roads when it comes to communicating, articulating, learning, socializing, and getting important points across to our inner circle. And making notable moves, collaborative things. So again, if you're moving, maybe you're not, maybe you're setting boundaries, or maybe you're fortifying the safety within your relationship. Some of these topics might come up for you. You might not be the one saying them, you might be receiving it, but those are the overarching themes for you, my Pisces friends. But I just want to say an encouraging word that there's just a lot of clarity can come up right now if you are looking into moving, or if you are looking into, making sure that your point gets across of what works and what doesn't work for you in your more immediate space. Because of all the spaces to make sure that your needs are being met and that things are balanced, it's within our immediate circles, right? So I just want to say that encouraging word that if you are working on that stuff, stay optimistic, stay open-minded. Because with these Gemini themes of communication, there really is a lot of signs of fresh starts that can come if we want to pivot or if we want to start something new right now. And there can be a lot more clarity around this time of like mutual understanding. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and move on to the journal prompts. I'll see you there, and I will see you after that for a few updates with the retreat. And yeah, hello. Welcome back to the journal prompts. I'm going to go ahead and read them, but you'll also find them in the comment section and the video description. So the first journal prompt is, in what ways can you be a bit more flexible and curious for this new lunar cycle? So what I mean by that is if there's any sort of hiccups, issues, miscommunication, stagnation, I don't know, something you've been working on or not, maybe it's just in general. What would it look like for you to be a bit more flexible and also curious in that space? And I say the curiosity because obviously Gemini is very malleable, flexible, curious, and that curiosity can lead to new perspectives of, oh, that's why they've been doing that. Okay, well, I have a little bit more empathy with you now because I understand your motivations. Those type of things, right? Curiosity about approaching it a bit differently, that can be very helpful navigating this world. Okay, second question, second prompt is, if you could embody the characteristics of someone you look up to, what would the top 2 characteristics be? Ooh, level 2 of this question is, if you could embody characteristics of somebody you envy, what would those 2 characteristics be? A little off topic, but maybe not actually, because Gemini is a chameleon. We're good at mirroring things and having deeper rooted empathy in a lot of ways, and that can be very helpful. Actually, I won't get into it, but there's a whole lesson there. Actually, maybe I'll answer this question after this. Okay, last question is, do you have any new or existing intentions that you would like to set or focus on for this new lunar cycle ahead? All right, y'all. Now that I have read through these prompts, I'm going to give you a few announcements, and then at the end, I will answer the prompts for myself to maybe spark some conversation, catch you up on my life, stuff like that. So first update is about the retreat. Like I mentioned before, had to cancel the retreat. The reason why I had to cancel the retreat that would have happened in Thailand this August is that the company that I'm working with, Trova Trip, that oversees basically every aspect of this trip so that we show up and we don't have to think about anything. You literally show up and for a week, we literally just go to the lobby. We have a trip guide. They take us to our activities. Everything's planned out for us. They do so much amazing work to coordinate everything. But they need a minimum of 8 people to sign up for the retreat within a certain time frame in order for it to happen. And I do want to take responsibility in that I was super excited to basically announce this like 2 months ago. And it generally requires a bit more time for everybody to have their finances in order, budget, plan things out. It's way better to announce it and give people time to sign up for at least over 6 months. And I did it in shorter notice. So that's one of the main reasons why I had to cancel it. And ultimately, I have decided to not reschedule it just yet, the retreat just yet, because I essentially want to get really clear on what aligns best for this community, what you guys want out of a retreat, what works financially for everybody. Is it better to announce a retreat and give everybody literally a year time to decide if you want to sign up for it, a year time to budget, all of those things? Would you prefer going back to Thailand versus having something in the States so the price is even lower? Do you want to lean more into adventures and travel and as well as astrology? Or do you want to lean more into all astrology workshops and then we have some meditation and yoga on the side, but it's in the States? These are the type of things that I really want to get clear on because I'm going to be fully transparent with you. My passion project, my goal, what I care about most is essentially content creation, offering forecast, being an astrologer on here with you, nerding out about astrology with you, and my planner line, my stationery company, Aura Line, that makes annual planners, wall calendars, and stationery that helps you stay aligned all year long and also helps to support my online work. Those are my 2 core intentions. And as much as I love the retreat, I want to make sure that it's aligned with those intentions and it doesn't take away from it. But all that to say, if you are interested in being notified at any point about a retreat, and if you want to complete a survey that I have in the description, letting me know what type of retreat works for you, it would help so much, would speed up the process of me choosing new dates and changing things around. In the description box, but that is my update. And the last thing that I wanted to say is like totally off topic, but kind of not. But I don't know if you guys have noticed, I've lost a little bit of weight. Your girl is a little snatched, okay? And I'm not saying, and I basically wanted to share with you what has helped me. And I want to preface this by saying this is not sponsored. But I started working with a company called Trainwell back in the spring of 2022 in preparation for my wedding. Is that cringe to say? I don't know. I just wanted to get healthy and get more fit and toned and stuff like that. And I don't know if you want to see a before and after picture. I just really don't want to lean into like body image stuff, but I do want to share what my path was. Basically what Trainwell is it's an app that connects you with a virtual trainer who makes you custom workouts based off of the equipment you have access to. So whether you already have a gym membership or you're like me, you have a collection of like gym equipment already in your home, based off of the stuff that you input into the app, they can customize a workout for you. You can schedule, I think it's weekly or bi-weekly calls with them so that they can continually customize things, updates things for you. They can offer you some nutritional advice as well. And I have literally had a membership since the spring of 2022. When I tell you I'm a Gemini stellium, I am an inconsistent person, but I'm sharing it with you not only because it has genuinely worked for me, like I literally have been using it for years now before I even told you about it. But on top of that, basically the sort of benefit that I get from it is that for anybody who signs up, I get a free month. So I figured, why not tell you guys about it? I genuinely love Trainwell. But anyway, with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. I'm sending you my love. If you made it all the way to the end, I would love for you to comment 3, butterfly emojis to signify spring in the Northern Hemisphere and us being social butterflies. Some of us, maybe not, maybe social butterflies with ourselves, articulating things, finding clarity within ourselves. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, the number one way to support my channel is hitting the like button. And with that said, I will leave you with my favorite quote, and that is, be gentle with yourself. Because life is about the journey, not the destination. All right, see you in the next one. Peace.